The introduction, setting the stage for the Battle of the Bulge, is a pivotal component in understanding one of World War II's most significant military engagements. This phase involves laying the groundwork by contextualizing the geopolitical and military climate leading up to the battle, which took place in the dense Ardennes forest in December 1944. At this point in the war, the Allied forces were gaining momentum, having liberated much of France after the D-Day landings. However, Adolf Hitler sought to split the Allied front and capture the crucial port of Antwerp to force a peace negotiation, launching a surprise counteroffensive that became known as the Battle of the Bulge. This introductory context is critical because it highlights the desperation and audacity of Hitler's final major offensive in Western Europe. Understanding this backdrop helps explain the high stakes and the strategic value both sides placed on this battle. The significance of setting the stage lies in demonstrating how this surprise attack tested the resilience and resourcefulness of Allied forces, ultimately proving a turning point in the war's final phases. For instance, one can look at the role of the harsh winter weather, which initially favored the German advance by grounding Allied air support and creating a temporary element of surprise. Another example is the story of the besieged town of Bastogne, where American forces, notably the 101st Airborne Division, held out despite being surrounded, thereby preventing German forces from exploiting their initial success. Supporting opinions often underscore the notion that the Battle of the Bulge exemplified the tenacity and adaptability of the Allied command structure under pressure. Dwight D. Eisenhower's ability to coordinate a swift and effective response, eventually turning the tide, is frequently highlighted. However, potential challenges in this narrative involve the initial intelligence failures of the Allies, who were taken by surprise despite several indicators of a German buildup. Some historians argue that complacency and overconfidence contributed to the initial German success, offering a contrasting view to the achieved Allied victory. This introductory context connects deeply with the broader themes of the battle, such as the endurance and logistics of wartime operations, the importance of intelligence in military strategy, and the eventual downfall of Nazi Germany. It sets up an understanding of how the Battle of the Bulge not only influenced the remainder of the war, but also showcased the complexities of warfare, where weather, terrain, and human resolve play critical roles in determining the outcome. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last stand, represents a pivotal moment in World War II, where the heading Strategic Objectives and Planning, Hitler's Last Gamble, encapsulates Hitler's attempt to turn the tide in favor of Nazi Germany. This phase, occurring in December 1944, saw Hitler orchestrate a surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, intending to split Allied forces along the Western Front, recapture the Belgian city of Antwerp, and compel the Allies to negotiate a peace treaty favoring the Axis powers. This audacious, if desperate, strategy was his final attempt to regain the upper hand before Germany's inevitable defeat. The significance of this strategic gamble was monumental. It was both a testament to Hitler's boldness and the desperate straits in which Nazi Germany found itself. By committing the last of Germany's reserves to this offensive, Hitler aimed to disrupt the Allied momentum and change the course of the war. The plan, characterized by its daring and high stakes, also showcased the reliance on unpredictable weather conditions to neutralize Allied air superiority. One example of this strategic gamble was Operation Grief, led by Otto Skorzeny, which involved German commandos disguised as American soldiers to sow confusion behind enemy lines. Another example was the initial success achieved by the 6th Panzer Army, which created the bulge in the Allied lines with rapid advances. These maneuvers represented the unpredictable tactics sought by Hitler to exploit Allied vulnerabilities. Opinions about this plan vary. Some historians argue that the boldness of Hitler's strategy, while initially successful, failed due to overambitious objectives and logistical shortcomings. Others suggest that it demonstrated a fundamental misjudgment of Germany's capabilities and the Allies' resilience. Challenges to this strategy included the heterogeneous nature of the German forces, logistical constraints, and fierce Allied resistance. Controversially, this attack exacerbated division within the German command and accelerated resource depletion. Alternative viewpoints propose that the resources expended in the Ardennes might have been better used to fortify Germany's defensive positions. Strategically, Hitler's gamble influenced the broader context of the war by illustrating the critical turning point where Axis forces shifted from offense to defense. It also underscored the Allies' capacity for rapid recovery and coordination under pressure, ultimately leading to their advance into Germany. This event intertwined with other aspects of the war, marking the final phase of the European theater and heralding the eventual collapse of Nazi Germany. The initial phases and breakthrough German advances during the Battle of the Bulge refer to the early stages of this World War II battle, when German forces launched a surprise offensive through the densely forested Ardennes region of Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. This bold move, orchestrated by Adolf Hitler, aimed at splitting the Allied lines, capturing the vital Belgian port of Antwerp, and encircling and destroying 4 Allied armies, thereby forcing a negotiated peace on the Western Front. This phase is crucial to the overall narrative of the Battle of the Bulge because it marks the last major German offensive of the war in the West. It demonstrated both the strategic boldness and the desperation of the Nazi regime as they sought to reverse their losing position in the war. Although initially successful, the German advances eventually faltered due to logistical issues, fierce Allied resistance, and the resilience of American troops, notably at Bastogne. One specific example of the German advances is the rapid movement through the Ardennes, where poor weather initially favored the Germans by grounding Allied air support and ensuring the element of surprise. Another example is the encirclement of Bastogne, where American forces, including the 101st Airborne Division, held out against significant odds until relieved by General Patton's Third Army. The idea that the initial success of the German advances had the potential to alter the course of the war is supported by some military historians who argue that if the Germans had achieved their objectives, it could have significantly prolonged the conflict and altered post-war Europe. However, there are challenges to this viewpoint, as others highlight that the German forces lacked the resources and logistical support needed for a sustained campaign, making ultimate success improbable. Critics of the German strategy point out that it was overly ambitious and failed to account for the resilience and rapid response of the Allied forces. The use of inexperienced troops and fuel shortages severely limited the German ability to capitalize on their initial successes. The initial phases of the battle influence other aspects of the conflict by setting the stage for a fierce Allied counteroffensive that would eventually lead to the attrition and defeat of German forces, thereby hastening the end of World War II in Europe. The unexpected initial success and eventual failure of the German advances underscore the complexity and unpredictability of wartime strategy. The struggle for Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge was one of the most pivotal encounters in World War II, marking a critical turning point in what would be Hitler's last significant offensive on the Western Front. Bastogne, a town in Belgium, was strategically vital due to its position at a crossroads of 7 main roads, making it essential for the Germans to capture it to advance their offensive effectively. For the Allies, retaining control over Bastogne was crucial to halt the German advance and protect critical supply lines. The significance of Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge cannot be overstated. The town's defense exemplified the determination and resolve of the Allied forces. When the German offensive launched in December 1944, the 101st Airborne Division, along with some elements of the 10th Armored Division, was encircled by German troops. Despite being outnumbered and running low on supplies and ammunition, the American forces held their ground under the harsh winter conditions, famously refusing a German demand for surrender with the defiant reply, "Nuts." One real-world application of Bastogne's defense was the psychological blow it dealt to the German forces. The failure to capture Bastogne timely delayed the German advance, allowing for Allied reinforcements to arrive and eventually turn the tide of the battle. Another example is the subsequent relief of Bastogne by General Patton's Third Army, which demonstrated the effectiveness of rapid response and coordination in military strategy, cementing Patton's reputation as a brilliant tactical commander. Supportive opinions often highlight Bastogne as a symbol of resilience and tactical brilliance, showcasing the resolve of American troops and the importance of holding key strategic positions even under dire circumstances. However, Some controversies arise regarding the initial intelligence failures that allowed the Germans to achieve surprise and the high casualties suffered by both sides. Challenges and alternative viewpoints focus on the Allies' initial underestimation of the German capability to mount such an offensive. There are debates about whether the heavy casualties were avoidable or a necessary cost of halting the German advance. The struggle for Bastogne connects to the broader context of the Battle of the Bulge by illustrating the critical nature of logistical and strategic planning. It reflects the broader themes of the Allies' ability to adapt and overcome, which were integral to the eventual success of the Western Front campaign. By holding Bastogne, the Allies effectively bottlenecked the German advance, turning a potentially disastrous situation into a decisive victory that paved the way for the eventual push into Germany.